In 1302, armored knights did not fall to stronger men. They fell because the ground beneath them refused to hold. This was not a battle between equal armies. On one side, heavy cavalry, noble bloodlines, centuries of victory. On the other, weavers, blacksmiths, merchants, no horses, no knightly honor, no feudal commanders, only land, formation, and discipline. This happened at Courtrai, also remembered as the Battle of the Golden Spurs. July 11th, 1302, on the Groningen fields near Courtrai in Flanders, flat land, wet soil, hidden drainage ditches cut the ground like scars. To knights, it looked harmless. To horses, it was fatal. France believed one charge would be enough. A display of power. A lesson to cities that dared resist royal control. But this was more than a battle. If these urban militias survived, every kingdom in Europe would face the same problem. Courtrai was not a moment of heroism. It was the place where knightly warfare was broken by mechanics. And what shattered the charge was not courageous, but timing, mud, and men trained to stand together. Stay with us, because this field did not just swallow an army. It wounded an entire age. At the dawn of the 14th century, Europe was shifting, unevenly, quietly, and without permission. For generations, power had belonged to kings and nobles. Land created authority. Blood defined rank, and war belonged to those born into it. But in the north, another kind of power was rising. Cities. Flanders was one of the richest regions in Europe, not because of castles or conquest, but because of cloth. Workshops ran from morning to night. Trade routes tied Flemish towns to markets across the continent. Money moved faster than titles ever could. And slowly, something unprecedented began to happen. Power was leaving castles and settling inside workshops and city halls. On paper, Flanders belonged to France. In reality, it governed itself through city councils, guilds, and merchants who answered to no lord. To King Philip IV of France, that was unacceptable. Philip, later remembered as the Fair, was not just a king. He was an architect of centralized rule. He expanded taxation, tightened royal authority, and sought to control every region capable of resisting the crown. And Flanders lay close to the French border. Wealthy, semi-independent, and dangerously influential. If it remained defiant, others might follow. So pressure came quickly. French officials were imposed. Taxes rose. Local leaders were stripped of power, sidelined, or arrested. Daily life inside the cities changed. People worked more and kept less. Decisions arrived from men who did not live there, did not trade there, and did not share the consequences. Resentment spread, first quietly, then openly, until it exploded. In 1302, in the city of Bruges, Flemish rebels struck before dawn. French soldiers and officials were hunted through the streets in an uprising remembered as the Bruges Matins. For Philip IV, this was no riot. It was a direct challenge to royal authority. And worse, it was led by ordinary townsmen. That precedent could not be allowed to survive. France would march north to deliver a single, crushing response. Courtrai would be that blow, or so France believed. Because Courtrai was not just a battle, it was a crackdown, meant to save the very idea of centralized royal power. France prepared for Courtrai the way it always had. Feudal summons spread across the kingdom. Knights arrived with their retinues. Armor was polished. War horses were fed, trained, and brought north. French warfare rested on a single belief: that battles were decided in moments. Speed, shock, momentum. A heavy cavalry charge, clean, fast, and overwhelming, was meant to end resistance before it could even organize. And the French commanders expected exactly that. At their head rode Robert II of Artois, the king's cousin, a veteran noble, and a living symbol of knightly honor. For men like Artois, war was not a calculation. It was a test of courage. Stopping was not an option. Honor demanded forward motion, even when the ground warned otherwise. Across the field, the Flemish prepared for a different kind of war. They knew they could not win a fair fight. They had no cavalry, no feudal hierarchy, no tradition of heroic charges. Leadership came not from castles, but from cities. From men like William of Jülich and Guy of Namur, shaped by councils and guild halls, not courts. Their strength was organization. Men were counted city by city, guild by guild. Positions were assigned so every fighter knew who stood beside him. Weapons were simple, but chosen with purpose. Spears and pikes to hold the line. The Gudendog, part club, part spike, for brutal work at arm's length. Training was narrow and unforgiving. Hold formation. Strike low. Do not pursue. One man breaking ranks could kill dozens. Discipline was not a virtue. It was survival. And then came the decision that mattered more than any weapon: the ground. The Flemish chose the fields of Groningen. Low, wet land outside Courtrai, sliced by drainage ditches and shallow streams. Some trenches were widened, others deepened. Many are concealed beneath grass and mud. To a knight, the field looked ordinary. To a horse, it was a trap. The Flemish did not need to stop the charge. They only needed to slow it. Because a cavalry charge without momentum is not a charge at all. It is a collapse, waiting to happen. The morning of July 11th did not announce itself with noise. Mist rose slowly from the low fields of Groningen. Cold air hovered above wet soil. Drainage ditches cut the ground like scars. Silent, waiting. The Flemish were already in position. They stood early, close, unmoving. Not because they were fearless, but because they had rehearsed this ground. Across the field, the French assembled with familiarity and confidence. Armor gleamed in the soft light. Knights spoke easily. Some laughed. This was supposed to end quickly. Robert II of Artois gave the order to advance. At first, the cavalry walked forward. Hooves pressed into damp earth. The formation held. Then came the signal. The charge. Thousands of horses surged ahead. Metal flashed. The sound rolled forward like thunder. For a moment, the old logic worked. Speed increased. Momentum gathered. Then the terrain intervened. As the cavalry entered the lower ground, hooves sank deeper than expected. Not enough to stop. Just enough to slow down. One horse adjusted its stride. The rider behind had no room. The line compressed. A stumble forced another correction. Corrections in mud led to loss of control. Hidden ditches emerged too late. A foreleg dropped. A horse fell. A fallen body became an obstacle. Obstacles triggered collisions. Collisions fractured the formation. Momentum did not disappear all at once. It died in pieces. Knights tried to force the charge through, but heavy armor punished every movement. Turning was slow, stopping was slower. Men fell. And when a knight fell in that field, armor ceased to be protection. Steel pressed him into mud, joints locked, vision narrowed, breath shortened inside the iron. This was the moment the Flemish had trained for. They didn't rush. They stepped forward, together. Spears struck low, into the horses first. Pikes pinned men where they lay. The Godendog rose and fell. Not wildly, but methodically. On horseback, armor had been power. On the ground, it was a prison. French infantry followed the cavalry into the broken zone. Boots sank, lines bent. Orders slowed, then vanished. The battlefield compressed. There was no open space, no clean withdrawal. Artois ordered renewed assaults. Again and again, cavalry advanced. Each charge is weaker than the last. Horses resisted ruined ground. Many knights dismounted, choosing to fight on foot. That choice sealed the outcome. On foot, armor dragged men down. The Flemish struck at the legs, balance, and exposed gaps. Small units attacked from the side. Others struck from behind. Then withdrew, vanishing back into formation. No pursuit. No disorder. This was not Crécy. There was no sky darkened by arrows, no single decisive blow. Courtrai was attrition, rhythm against force, time against tradition. As hours passed, the French did not panic. They fragmented. One unit pulled back, another followed without orders. Gaps opened. The Flemish advanced carefully, blocking paths, sealing exits. Robert of Artois rode into this collapsing mechanism. He did not fall because he lacked courage. He fell because courage could not stop the ground from refusing momentum. When Artois was killed, it was not merely a commander lost. It was a way of war and a way of thinking, breaking under its own weight. By afternoon, resistance dissolved into scattered fights. When the noise finally faded, the most feared cavalry in Europe lay broken across a field that had denied them speed. At Groningen, war was no longer decided by bravery, but by rhythm, terrain, and time. Silence returned to the fields of Groningen. What remained did not look like victory, looked like a consequence. French losses were severe where it mattered most. Not among common soldiers, but among knights, nobles, and commanders. Hundreds of mounted elites lay dead. Entire noble lineages were broken in a single day. Among them was Robert II of Artois. With his death, France did not simply lose a battle. It lost a pillar of its feudal leadership. For Flanders, the result was immediate and political. They held the field, and by holding it, they defended their right to exist without direct royal control. Courtrai was proof that urban communities could survive a king's army. The dead could not all be recovered. There were too many. Armor was removed where bodies lay. Weapons were gathered systematically. Then came the act that defined the battle's memory. From fallen knights, the Flemish collected the Golden Spurs, symbols of mounted rank and noble privilege. They were not taken as trophies of pride. They were taken as material evidence. There were enough of them to matter, enough to speak not of a duel, but of a system brought down. The spurs were displayed publicly in Courtrai, not to celebrate bloodshed, but to make a statement no words could soften. Knights had fallen, in numbers, in the open. Across Europe, the message spread faster than any army. Philip IV would answer with renewed campaigns and harsher control. But something fundamental had shifted. The spell was broken. From that moment on, no one could truly believe. That armor and birth alone made a man untouchable. The golden spurs on the mud marked the instant. Europe saw the knight as mortal. Courtrai did not end the war. In the years that followed, France struck back. Campaigns resumed. Pressure returned. Control was contested again between 1302 and 1305. The battlefield at Groningen did not close the conflict, but it closed something else. It closed an illusion. The illusion that cavalry alone decides wars. The illusion that birth guaranteed dominance. The illusion that discipline without adaptation was enough. That truth did not vanish after Courtrai. It lingered, and others noticed. In 1314, at Bannockburn, Scottish infantry would stand firm. Not because they were braver, but because they controlled space, timing, and cohesion. In 1315, at Morgarten, Swiss militias would repeat the lesson, using terrain and collective discipline to shatter mounted elites. These battles were not accidents. They were consequences. Courtrai had revealed something permanent about warfare, that battles are not won by moments of heroism, but by systems that survive time, fatigue, and error. This shift went beyond the battlefield. Cities gained confidence. Guilds gained influence. Rulers learned that armies built solely on lineage were fragile. Power began to depend less on who you were born to, and more on how well you prepared, coordinated, and adapted. That lesson still applies. Modern wars are not decided by the strongest weapon, but by the force that maintains rhythm, absorbs shock, and adapts faster than its enemy. Courtrai does not tell us that knights were obsolete. It tells us something more unsettling, that any system which refuses to change will not collapse in glory. It will bleed first. Courtrai did not kill the age of knights, but it made that age bleed for the first time. If you want to see this lesson repeated, watch Bannockburn, then Morgarten. And tell us in the comments, which battle do you think exposed the weakness of an entire system? The way Courtrai did?